Hey, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Traffic Jam Epidemic. It's Jack Subaru, and we're continuing our deep dive into those driving pet peeves that turn every commute into a headache. Last episode, we got started, and today, we are continuing where we left off. Ready to hit the gas? Let's go.
It's a good reminder that driving isn't just about the technical skills. It's about understanding, like, the cultural nuances, the unspoken communication that happens on the road.
Exactly, and those nuances, they can even be seen in something as simple as merging onto a highway. We have some notes here about how drivers in different places approach that on-ramp acceleration.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever been stuck behind someone on an on-ramp who's going, like, ridiculously slow, as if they're terrified to merge into traffic?
Oh, for sure. It can be really nerve-wracking, both for the person on the ramp and those already on the highway. Merging is all about timing and matching the speed of traffic smoothly, like trying to join a fast-moving river. You got to find the right spot to enter and adjust your pace accordingly.
Yeah, that's a great way to picture it. And you know, while we're on the topic of highway etiquette, what about those drivers who insist on cruising side by side in different lanes? It's like they create a rolling roadblock. They're in their own little convoy, completely unaware of the frustration they're causing everyone behind them.
Oh, that's classic. I call that lane obliviousness. They get locked into their lane no matter what the traffic is doing, no matter what other drivers need.
Yeah.
It's like they found their comfort zone and they refuse to budge.
Right. It's like, this is my lane and I'm sticking to it. But their stubbornness creates a bottleneck, and that disrupts the entire flow of traffic. And it's not just annoying, it can be downright dangerous too.
You're right. When traffic is forced to slow down suddenly or change lanes abruptly, the risk of accidents goes way up, especially at high speeds. Plus, it can lead to more aggressive driving as people get frustrated and try to get around that roadblock.
And speaking of aggressive driving, let's talk about those drivers who shoot out from side streets or parking lights without even looking. I've had way too many close calls with people like that. It makes your heart jump out of your chest.
Oh yeah, those sudden, unexpected movements are a huge hazard. It shows how crucial it is to be predictable and considerate. It's not just about following rules, it's about being aware, thinking ahead, and anticipating what other drivers might do. When you're about to enter traffic, take your time, look around, try to make eye contact with other drivers if you can, and signal clearly. Doing those simple things can prevent accidents and make things smoother for everyone.
It really all comes down to communication, making sure we're all on the same page. And speaking of communication, what about those drivers who seem to think their car is a mobile nightclub? Blasting music so loud, you can feel the vibrations in your own car.
Ah, yes, the bass enthusiasts. It shows how inconsiderate behavior can affect public space. We all have our own musical taste, but we have to be mindful of the volume, especially in a shared environment like the road.
It's like they're forcing their music on everyone else. And it's more than annoying. Loud music can actually be distracting, not just for other drivers, but for the driver themselves. It can drown out important sounds like sirens or horns, and that can lead to some really dangerous situations.
Absolutely, and it's not just the volume. The type of music matters too. Some music, particularly stuff with a fast tempo and a lot of bass, can actually increase arousal levels and aggression. Not ideal when you're driving. It's almost like they're creating their own road rage soundtrack.
It's a recipe for disaster. And speaking of disaster, let's not forget about those drivers who don't respect pedestrians and cyclists. Not yielding at crosswalks, not giving cyclists enough space. It's not just frustrating, it's incredibly dangerous.
This is so important, and it highlights a big shift that needs to happen in driving culture. We need to move away from that car-first mentality and realize that roads are shared spaces for everyone. It doesn't matter how you get around. Pedestrians and cyclists are the most vulnerable people out there, and we, as drivers, have a responsibility to keep them safe.
It's about changing our perspective, understanding that driving isn't just about getting somewhere fast. It's about sharing the road responsibly and making sure everyone gets home safe, whether they're driving, biking, or walking. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about a pet peeve that always seems to cause a debate. Driving in the middle lane on the highway. Some people swear by it, others see it as the ultimate sign of lane obliviousness. What's your take?
Ah, the middle lane dilemma.
Yeah.
This is a great example of how driving etiquette can be so subjective. Some drivers see the middle lane as a safe haven, avoiding the merging craziness of the right lane and the passing frenzy of the left. Others see it as an unnecessary obstacle. It's It's about finding a balance between your own comfort and keeping traffic flowing smoothly.
Right, finding that balance. And speaking of flow, we have to talk about moving over for emergency vehicles. You'd think it would be common sense, but I've seen so many drivers who either don't know what to do or just don't care when they hear those sirens.
It's so important for safety, and it's essential to know the right thing to do. When you see or hear an emergency vehicle coming, pull over to the right safely and quickly, and stop completely. That gives them a clear path and those precious seconds that can literally save lives.
It seems obvious, but it's amazing how many people just ignore those flashing lights and sirens, like they're in their own little world, totally oblivious to the emergency happening around them.
It just shows that driving requires more than just technical skills. It requires awareness, empathy, a sense of responsibility for our own safety and the safety of everyone else. But, we have to acknowledge that sometimes these annoying habits are just, inexperience or uncertainty.
That's true. We were talking earlier about all that new car technology, how all the bells and whistles can sometimes create more confusion than they solve. I've seen drivers get so dependent on things like parking sensors and backup cameras that they forget to actually look around to check their blind spots. It's like they're putting blind faith in technology, even when it's clearly not working right.
Yeah, it's a classic case of technology being both a blessing and a curse. These features are supposed to make driving safer and easier, but they can also give drivers a false sense of security, making them complacent.
Right. Just like anything else in life, moderation is key. We have to use technology as a tool, not rely on it completely. We still need to be engaged and alert when we're driving, even with all those fancy gadgets.
I agree completely. Technology should enhance our driving, not replace it. We need to remember that even the most advanced technology can't fix human error or make up for a lack of attention. We have to be present, proactive drivers, no matter how much tech we have in our cars.
So it always circles back to the human element. It's about recognizing that driving is a privilege, not a right, and that privilege comes with a responsibility to be aware, considerate, and safe. But, even the most conscientious driver out there has their pet peeves.
Oh, absolutely. It's human nature to get annoyed by behavior that seems rude or dangerous. And sometimes just letting off some steam, venting a bit, could be good for you.
Exactly, letting it out. But I think these conversations, the ones we're having about driving pet peeves, can be really insightful too. They tell us a lot about our personalities, about cultural norms, about the complex social dynamics that happen every day on the road.
That's a good point. It's like a microcosm of society, all packed into this shared space where everyone's trying to get to their destination. And while it can definitely be frustrating sometimes, it's also a fascinating study of human behavior, this intricate dance of cooperation and conflict that we all do, whether we realize it or not.
That's a great way to put it. We're all part of this giant, unscripted reality show where each driver is playing their own part. And sometimes those parts clash, and that's when we get the tension, the funny moments, and sometimes even the dangerous ones.
Exactly, and those moments, as annoying as they can be, are also what make driving such a human experience. It reminds us that we're not alone out there, and that what we do affects everyone else on the road.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in making driving safer and more harmonious for everyone. Yeah, it's like we're all woven into this huge tapestry of driving experiences. Each thread, a different viewpoint, a different style, a different set of expectations.
And sometimes those threads get all tangled up, creating these knots of frustration, and conflict. But those moments, the tense ones, those are the moments where we can actually learn something, adapt, and become, hopefully, more mindful drivers.
We've been talking a lot about individual driving behaviors, but it's interesting to think about how these pet peeves, how they reflect bigger societal trends, like the increase in distracted driving, especially with smartphones. It seems to mirror our growing reliance on technology, in every aspect of life. What are your thoughts on that connection?
It is a fascinating parallel. There's no doubt that technology has changed how we live, work, and interact with the world. But it's also created new challenges, especially when it comes to staying focused and being present.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, and it's getting harder to tune out the noise and concentrate on what's right in front of us, whether that's driving, having a conversation, or just trying to enjoy a quiet moment.
Exactly, and that's called attention fragmentation. It's having a real impact on our cognitive abilities and even our well-being in general. And it's especially worrying when we talk about driving, where a split-second lapse in focus can have, really bad consequences.
One thing that really struck me while we were getting ready for this deep dive was how strongly people feel about their driving pet peeves. It's clear that these aren't just little annoyances, they tap into something deeper, a sense of frustration, even anger. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because driving is such a personal thing. We spend so much time in our cars. And how we drive is often seen as an extension of ourselves, our personalities, our values even. So when someone cuts us off or tailgates or blasts their music, it feels like a direct attack, a violation of our space and, our sense of order.
It's like they're messing with our sense of control, our sense of safety, even our sense of who we are as drivers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important to keep in mind that we're all sharing the road and that those annoying habits, even the really frustrating ones, are often just human error, lack of experience, or just a different way of seeing things.
So how can we move past those knee-jerk reactions of frustration and anger? How can we create a more harmonious, more forgiving driving environment?
Well, I think it starts with empathy. Remembering that the person in the car next to us is, a person. They have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own struggles.
It's easy to forget that, to dehumanize other drivers, to see them as just obstacles instead of fellow travelers. But when we take a moment to pause, to see things from their perspective, it can change everything.
You're right. And even if we don't agree with how someone is driving, we can at least try to understand why. Maybe they're having a rough day, maybe they're lost, maybe they're just not that comfortable behind the wheel.
So it's about showing a bit of grace, a bit of understanding, a bit of patience. Remembering that we all make mistakes and that a little kindness can go a long way.
Exactly. It really can. And in the end, it's about realizing that we're all in this together. We're all navigating the same roads, facing the same challenges, hoping to get to our destination safely.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of driving pet peeves. We've covered a lot, from the dangers of distracted driving to the etiquette of roundabouts to the psychology behind how we act and react behind the wheel.
It's been a great discussion. And I hope everyone listening has learned something new about driving behavior and why it's so important to make driving safer and more harmonious for everyone.
I know I have. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one last question to ponder. Knowing everything we've talked about today, how can we each contribute to a more positive driving environment? One that goes beyond just avoiding our own pet peeves.
Maybe it starts with a small act of kindness, like letting someone merge in smoothly or resisting that urge to tailgate. Or maybe it's just being more patient in traffic, remembering that everyone is trying to get somewhere, just like us.
And maybe, just maybe, it's about showing a little more understanding to our fellow drivers, remembering that we all make mistakes and that a little understanding goes a long way. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of driving pet peeves. It's a world that can be frustrating, funny, and always important. We hope you learned some new things and maybe even had a laugh or two with us along the way. As always, we love to hear from you. What are your biggest driving pet peeves? Share your stories and thoughts on social media. Until next time, drive safe and stay aware out there.
All right, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of Traffic Jam Epidemic Sonora Meow here. And let me just say, if you're listening while driving, please don't be that person who thinks the speed limit is just a suggestion. It's not. Karen, it's really not. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, if you ever feel like tailgating someone, just picture them in a bumper car at an amusement park. You'll feel less mad, but still slightly tempted to hit them with a foam bat. Like, comment, share, subscribe, meow.